Okay, so if you've come this far, you've maybe created a room or two. That's a basic room, or maybe even more. And now you're thinking, all right, I want to do some more fun in my rooms and create them more, have more complicated things. So let me show you a little bit more complicated stuff. So this is the example that I put on the page that you could download. Um, I'm going to take this code. So I just wanted to show you this code first. This is like what I said you could use as an example. I'm going to take this and I'm going to interweave it with, I guess that's the word. I don't know. I'm putting it with the previous work that I did. So here's the kitchen. Here's the description of the kitchen. Here's the doors. Here's my input. I added the ability to strip out the information, and lowercase it. And then I can move east, I can move west. But what I did then was added the ability to open the refrigerator. So I added a new action, and I opened the oven, and then I also opened a cabinet. So I kind of added three, objects in my room that you can do. Now again, I've only made it so you can say open refrigerator. What else might people have to say? Um, so use fridge, maybe, and then maybe open fridge or use refrigerator. So I have to think a little bit about that. What if they just say get food? Then I want to make sure I do that. So lots of choices. Never sure which one's the best, and you could drive yourself a little crazy coming up with a bunch of them. So try to think of a few obvious ones. So this is just a real simple thing. I open in the refrigerator and there's bad stuff in it, and it says you decide to leave them alone. And then it just returns to one, which means it goes back to the kitchen because I haven't left the kitchen yet. I guess the most important thing you do on all of these actions is you always do return something. If you don't hit return, the program will freeze and just hang there. So you have to return or nothing happens. Um, so, always think to yourself, where do they go? If they're in the same room, return the same room. If they're in a new room, which I'll show you next, then you can return that new number, right? You could maybe say that there's a teleportation device and they walk in it and maybe they randomly teleport to some random room. You can actually do that. Create a random number and they randomly go somewhere. Who knows what will happen? Um, okay, so now I have another action that they could open the oven. And again, I have to think about other ways and that kind of thing. And so now they open the oven, and it turns out that there's somebody in there that's going to kill them. Now, it's not really much of a fun game if you just come up with ways to kill people. I mean, it's fun for you, the coder. But when the player plays it, if they die too often, they're going to get frustrated. So it's up to you to decide how often you want to just have a random thing that they try to do that kills them. Um, but what happens when you do get killed or when you get to another room? Well, I was thinking I'll make a new room, and it's kind of off my map, right? My map has 10 rooms, and they're labeled 1 through 10. So what if I return to some kind of crazy number like 99? And then down here in my room thing, I can say, why is that not typing? Because I'm too far down. I can say, if it gets a 99, then maybe I want to go to a new function, like room equals death. Like I don't have to give this a room number. I could say room 99 as well, but I could just say death, right? And then I could go up here and I could say what happens if they die. And then the same thing would happen like every time they die. You are dead. Print, play again sometime, right? Maybe it's that. And then if I don't put a return on this one, then it is going to just hang there on purpose. And then they could, just be like, oh, why can't I go anywhere? Um, you can eventually build some code that actually like restarts them. That's a little tricky, and I'm happy to show you sometime how to do that. But you could just let them sit there and do nothing if they die, because who knows? And then lastly, this is the one that you're probably going to do more often, is that you're going to give them the ability to do something and it's going to involve an object. So I did open cabinet. Now, just to make this simple, I said if you open the cabinet, you see a key and you automatically take it. You could just tell them they see a key and return to 1, and then they have to type in use key or get key, I should say, and then they actually get it right. So you could be like if action equals use key, then we return 1. Well, no, sorry. Then we say silver key equals true and we return 1. So now they've like picked up the key. So that would be like take this out if you don't want them to pick it up automatically. But in my case, I thought, you know what, they should just get it automatically. That's fine. Maybe I'll take this out in a second and show you this next one because there's a trick you can do. Um, but I guess I should have printed something down here too if I was really going to build this, like you've picked up the key, blah, blah, blah. So you give them some feedback. Now, this is the part that's a little different. So that's what I want to spend just some time on. Um, and maybe it's not worth doing this other thing because I want to make sure I explain this well. So, you set a variable. Now, if you create a variable, that means in this program that variable has to exist somewhere else. So let me show you that. The trick about this, if you remember functions, which this is a function badge, so hopefully you're thinking about functions, is that there's two kinds of variables. There's local variables and there's global variables. Our action is a local variable. This action exists in this room and only in this room. When we leave this room, the computer forgets what the action is. You can't go back and ever say, what did I do before? It's not going to be there anymore. Um, and so this has like a lifespan of this room and then it's gone. That's great for something like an action that we, want to just kind of make a new action. That's why we don't have to say action 1 in room 1 and action 2 in room 2, right? We could just say action every single time, which makes copying and pasting nice. But if we say, you know what, we want a key and we want this key to work, maybe down in room 5, there's going to be a locked door and they need to open it. And they need to have the silver key. So how do we know that they have the silver key? So that is why we need a global variable so that the function room 5 and the function room 1 can both deal with it. So the way you set up a global variable is you have to put them at the top of your code so that your code knows this affects every single place that it's going to happen. So way up at the top, I leave a spot. In fact, I created a spot if you're using the code that I made. Um, so there's a spot up here, and every time you make a new variable, so you're like, oh, there's a sword, and why is it set to false? Well, they're going to be Boolean variables because there's only two states. You can't have a silver key be like equal like a 4 or 2, right? It's like you either have it or you don't have it. I suppose you could make it a string that's just like have, but I find it easier because there's a built-in thing to do this. It's either true or false. We call that a flag. It's like raising a flag, like if you get your mail in your mailbox, sometimes post office person like raises a little flag on your mailbox to say, "Hey, you've got mail." Or maybe it's like a penalty in football. The referee throws a flag when there's a penalty, which is a signal like, "Hey, penalty is true now." So that's what this is. But we don't start with the key, so we make it false. If you were like, hey, I want to start with a sword, then sure, make a variable called sword and make it true. But most of the time in a text adventure, you start with very little. Now, this is the other trick that you have to do. If you are going to use the silver key in room 1, you then have to tell room 1, yes, there's going to be something in here and I'm going to make it global. So it's kind of you have to tell it the silver key that's in this room is the global variable silver key that I've been talking about. Otherwise, it will still assume down here when it sees it, it would assume, oh, this must be some other silver key that's a local variable. So you have to say, no, no, this room is going to be looking at silver key. Now in room 2, if room 2 doesn't use the silver key, then I don't need to say global, right? So global silver key. That's nice. It will load it into the room too. But if you're not going to use it there, there's no point. You don't need to. But if you are going to use it in another room, you better make sure you say global or it's not going to know what's going on. So that's the basic rule for global variables, and that's how you make flags. It's how you make really interesting things. Let's just take a look. Then you can stop the video now if you want, because I'm going to do some complicated things kind of like this later. But um, this is for people who think, but wait, how come I don't just put an action inside of here that's like, do I take the key or not? Like I have two actions. And I say you make one action and you just put all these elifs in here for all the different things that you could have. It shouldn't say use key, it should say get key, by the way. Or take key. Um, so what's going to happen is they open the cabinet and the cabinet is empty except for a silver key. You take it. So what we could do, first of all, what we could do here is we could say if the silver key is false, then it says you take the cabinet is empty except for the silver key, you take it. Because what if they've already taken it, right? So then you put an else here, which means the silver key is true, which means you could say the cabinet is now empty. So I don't know why I put three on there. It was only going to be one line. And then in either case, we return to line one. Now, what happens if they try to get the key, but they haven't looked in the cabinet? What if somebody just goes around and types in get key in every single thing? So then you're like, well, when they open the cabinet, I should make a flag that is like cabinet equals true, right? And then if I do that, I can say, here where they take the key, I can say if the cabinet is true, then we can print you take the key and silver key is true. Um, and if the cabinet isn't true, you could say print you see no key here. So if they haven't opened the cabinet, then they can't take the key because it's like, what are you talking about? There's no key. And then they open the cabinet and it's like, oh, cabinet is true. I guess they're gonna take the key. And so by doing these kind of layers of flags, you can make really complicated situations. Now, I encourage you to try to keep it simple and only put a few in. One or two per room max. You only need two in the whole program to get an A, so it's just up to you how complicated you want to make it. Um, if you do add something like a cabinet, then you just have to think to yourself, aha, there's two things I need to do. I need to make sure that I list it in my global variables at the top of there, and I have to make sure that I set it at the beginning of the program to whatever I want to set it to. And so that's how you make global variables, that's how you make flags and make really interesting fun rooms with lots of actions. Good luck.